Oh, there wasn't.
Yeah, we're good. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first breakout session. We've got a good one lined up for you guys today. My name's Curtis Sutherland. I'm a Senior Vice President with Tab Bank, and we're sponsoring today's session. This session, we found Tyler. We've worked with Tyler actually for a number of years. He's the co-founder and CFO of Every, which is a great company. You guys will have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about that today. But this session in particular, it's about succeeding as a strategic CFO by adding value through finance, strategy, leadership, communication, and selling. Let me introduce you to Tyler Ploeger. I think I got your last name right, Tyler.
You did.
Okay.
It's awesome, Curtis.
Since 2018, Tyler has been the co-founder and CFO of Every, which is based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Every is an awesome payroll company that allows employees to get paid daily. And that's a trend you're probably seeing in the industry a little bit these days. There's companies like Tyler that provide this service. We've had an opportunity to see how it works, and it's actually a very neat product. Tyler's career has included 3+ years as the managing partner at Vital Accounting and Consulting, and he had a 12-year span as an audit partner at Tanner LLC. He is a board member of the Hell Center Theater. He is a member of the Utah Valley University Accounting Department Board. And Tyler is a CPA, and he graduated from the University of Utah with a master's in accounting. So we'll turn it over to you, Tyler.
Thanks, Curtis. Appreciate it. I know people say payroll. Like, really? Really? So, no, I appreciate it, Curtis. Let's see if I can get this fired up. All right. So Gary has big experiences, right? So I'm just a simple guy that grew up in Salt Lake, So I grew up here, born and raised, went to West High, inner city kid, for lack of a better word, here. But really I'm excited for the topic. We talk a little bit about my history, and some people say, well, why'd you leave public accounting after making partner at one of the biggest CPA firms inside of Salt Lake? And the simple answer really is it was boring over time. And I couldn't see myself reviewing work papers and doing compliance work long term. And so for me it was, okay, let's change. And for a lot of the colleagues that I actually see here, it's fun to see familiar faces, but for me I live by one thing, which is you can't waste a day. And so with that, I'm going to start. We'll talk about a lot of our experience with Tab, as well as, what's my personal experience and background, and also a little bit first about Every. The reason I'm starting with Every is because it's going to help frame some of the conversation. When you look at Every, and some of the people here know about us, the world is changing around us very, very quickly. And for us, when we looked at the world back 3 years ago when we started the company, Same Day ACH was just coming out, and there's this huge flight of, hey, how fast can we actually get people money for doing a job? And so when you look at the back of the slide here, we're atomizing payments. We heard this from an investor that we were courting, so to speak, a few weeks ago. And every single action around us is now being forced into what is the value associated to it. And for us, we look at the future along with our banking partner and say, okay, how fast can we actually run? Is there rails that we can go faster? And how do you break down a unit of action that allows an employee to capture the value, frankly, at their will? And it's from our lens at Every that an employee should be able to have the option. The employee should be able to come to you and say, all right, businessman, I'm going to take the job from you, and I want to be paid on the 5th, 15th, and 20th. And they should be able to say, okay. It shouldn't be, in our opinion, the other way around. Or an employer has the right to tell you, hey, we're going to pay you on the 15th and the 30th of each month for work that you've already done. So for us, it's just a different mindset. And as you've seen in the last 2 years, it's accelerated. So with the pandemic for us, it's helped us because gig platforms now have sprung up all over the place, trying to capture workers. I'm going to do delivery drive, or Uber Eats. We look at temporary bartenders. We have thousands and thousands of these contractors on our platform that all they're doing is doing an action and getting paid immediately thereafter. So when you look at your businesses, I'd be just prepared on think about, when you look at hiring, who are you attracting? And how are you going to do it? Are you going to have to change your pay model? I'm going to argue with you very quickly, the world is going to change, so you're going to have to reconsider this. And for us, we're on the kind of the tip of the spear. We're the guys saying, hey, this is the way, this is the future. And the world is actually coming along faster than we expected. And so just be prepared when you look at these statistics on how people really want to get paid a little bit differently. Now, this is where our relationship with Tab and my experience with Tab has been super helpful. I was one of their auditors, honestly, previously. So that helped me kind of understand what type of a bank they are and who are the people that are leading that bank. And they're innovative. So for us, when we are trying to figure out how do you actually accelerate pay to a worker and allow the company to keep their same cash cycle, hugely significant, because my dad, frankly, he hates it. He thinks it's the dumbest idea ever. He says, why would I ever let my employees get paid every day? And it's like some stewardship that he feels the right as a father, that he can hold their money and teach them a lesson, I guess, by doing so. So we had to get a credit facility with a partner bank that is truly unique. I don't know of another kind of credit facility out there, honestly, that we spun up that does for payroll dollars what we've done. It's a hybrid product that we frankly kind of created together with Tab that allows us to fund payments to workers at really minimal interest cost, and we never charge the customer for it, and allow the workers to capture their earnings, and then the company just repays us on their normal cash cycle. So for example, day 1 to day 15, Tom is getting paid every single day. At the end of that, you're running payroll on the 20th. Well, we get repaid on the 20th for those earnings before. So for us, hugely significant, and it's an ever-scaling debt need from our side. So realistically, we'll have a $20 million and then a $50 million and then a $100 million facility just to effectuate the short-term lending ability so employees and workers can get money faster. As opposed to the current trend, which is, hey, payroll company, can you just fund our payroll for us in arrears, and as a result, we'll make 5 to 7% of interest income, is what a lot of these payroll companies make off of the backs of the employees, which we obviously don't think is right. All right, this didn't work yet, and I'm almost done with this part. So I'm going to skip this and move on to, now the topic of the day is succeeding as a strategic CFO, and how does the lens look now, and how do we look at it from a CFO perspective to be able to help our clients a little bit easier. Now when I look at the world, I'm going to go to some of my experiences. So for those that don't know, I was a former MLS soccer referee. And so every single game, we would walk around the field. The same thing. Walk around, we'd measure every single line. We'd measure the height of the goal. We'd do all these basic things and remind ourselves of the signals. What are we going to do in this scenario? And all of this was done purely to remind ourselves of what to do in a certain when a certain action happens and how we're going to react. And so I call this really just the foundation, excuse me, of who we are as a CFO. Obviously, all this stuff matters. I chuckle a little bit. Rob used to tell me a little bit on this technical accounting stuff. When you're an auditor, you think it is the best stuff ever. It is super important. GAAP accounting is like the Bible. Then you get out and you start a business and you say, well, what works? And how do I just make stuff happen? And we'll deal with the gap accounting stuff later. That's how, frankly, all of the businesses are built. And so it was good advice from Rob when I was coming up through Tanner, really, and then learning after, when I was helping consult companies raise money, is all of that just doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's what is the engine of the company and how does it actually work? All of this other stuff really is for financial investment purposes, comparing companies. Like, all of that stuff is great, but operationally, for me, this stuff, not that interesting. I have 2 ADD. Literally, like, I get as fast out of transactional accounting as humanly possible. Because to me, again, the value that you can ascribe as a CFO is not in, did we account for prepaids, or are we doing all this debt accounting correctly? Like, to me, that's not the value that we're giving to the company. It's much, much higher. And so make sure that you obviously have a controller, potentially, or an assistant controller that loves this stuff. But for me, that's not where I drive value, and it's not what I love. And maybe that's how some of you feel as well. Now, all of us have biases going into each and every situation that we're in. As an accountant, we all are very, very similar in terms of personality types. We're all fairly conservative. We all look at the glass generally half empty instead of 3/4 full. So we all come with these biases that really live over here and say, okay, we live our lives really in kind of safe land, which is a little sad, honestly, when I look at it, because I think, well, what could you be doing? How could you be influencing the world a little bit differently? And so when you look at biases, I'd say here's generally the constraints that each one of us has as a CFO. Like, we're trying to solve problem after problem after problem. But can you eliminate some of these items to allow you to focus on something higher? And so that'd be my argument to you is I do a lot of automation. So I have 1/2 of an accountant, and we're a 25, 30 person. Everything else is done by robots, admittedly. A lot of the transaction accounting is all managed by robots. And for me, that allows me, when you listen to Gary's talk, or speech above us, was I don't know what the future is going to be. I don't know FTEs. I don't know what's going to cost me. So to me, looking at the lowest common denominator and saying, what can I actually automate and get out of my way is very, very important to do. More so, I'd say, in the future than now. There's huge businesses that are driven really around systems automation. And if you haven't considered this, I would absolutely encourage you to quit throwing headcount at problems. We sometimes in the software world call it deliberately inefficient. Try to not be deliberately inefficient too long, because ultimately unwinding, and I don't know what's going on, the unwinding the headcount is harder for the organization than just dealing with it the right way to start. And fortunately, Ron Ross, who really started Every, he's a CFO by trade as well. So you have 2 nerdy accountants really looking at the world from the same lens, trying to figure out how do we change the world a little bit differently, and then trying to get ourselves getting out of our own ways here to actually innovate in a space that is generally stagnant. So I'd look at yourself, do some introspection. I call it changing the frame. In fact, on the way here, Jenny hates this. She's in the back, my wife. She hates the fact that I take intentionally different ways home driving. I just don't like the same thing. And for me, it's look at your world slightly different all the time, because it'll make you come to different conclusions, potentially on the same problems, but you'll be able to solve them a little bit differently. All right, now we'll go back to the next one. So again, once we have our foundation in front of us, it's called position training. So I played college football at the U and under Ronnie Mack, unfortunately, because it was before the glory days. So all the BYU fans, well done. Awesome. But I remember we used to take, I was a tight end, so the tackles and the tight ends, we'd go position training together. And every single day we would work on foot technique. And that's what you'd work on for 30 or 40 minutes, and there's cameras above you shining down, and then you review your feet and your technique. And I remember this, and I think, okay, what are our position training that we're doing so deliberately every single day that it makes it very easy for us to obtain? Obviously, that repetition is trying to build in behavioral science is called automated systems versus reflective systems. And I'm a nerdy kind of mind behavioral guy. And so for me, how do you get every decision that you make potentially over to the automated land versus the reflective land, which is, okay, I'm going to analyze every little thing, and it's potentially going to paralyze me because I haven't seen the movie before. And I need to think every little iteration before I make a decision. The more of those repetitions or scenario building that you can do before you actually run into those scenarios allows you to get from your reflective system to your automated system more quickly. And that would be one of my other kind of huge areas of advice is scenarios, until you know exactly what's going to happen in this scenario and that scenario and how you're going to act in a certain situation. If somebody comes in for the dev team needs another $500,000 because they're behind on a project as usual. Like we know they always are. Okay, well, how do I, again, influence them a little bit differently to help it to be where it's a programmatic response that I just know they're probably going to be behind. Okay, well, what am I going to anticipate as a result? So again, this in moving here from reflective, by spending so much time in reflective, it becomes an automated system to you. Encourage you to continue to do that. Now, this is one of the biggest things that I think is very difficult to obtain as a CFO. We talked, I think Dave mentioned it above, which was, it was an influence that he used. Respect was the word he used. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting word. Like, is it because we have pocket protectors and various, like, why does CFOs have to have respect? Why are we looked at as potentially like the negative person in our organization? I don't think that's really fair. Like, we're actually probably the one that's trying to help the business out the most, and they just need to understand why we care so much and why we just look at the world maybe a little bit differently. And so when you look at a couple of these items, these are obviously things we're stewards of. But this top part of organizing context, this is what Gary was talking about and Dave talks about all the time, is what are those metrics? What is the drumbeat of the organization? How do you influence so that we know we're on the path or we're not on the path? What is the transparency around that that allows us to influence people to, frankly, have defaults of how they act, which is absolutely on the path that we want them to go on? All of us spend a lot of time because we think these are the items that we need to do, and they're routine. Like, we know we have to budget. Again, I agree with Gary and Dave. It's terrible process, budgeting. To me, forecasting, that's the more interesting part of it. The budget part is, well, it's an afterthought to me of how and why are we going, where we're going to go. But it's necessary because, again, you've got to get people context to understand why we're doing the things we are. Now, personally, again, when you look at how, again, strategically, when you're doing, and Rob, I don't know what's going on. I'm like a Mac user, and people are going to say, it's because you're a Mac user in this kind of group, I'm sure. I don't know how to do, well, if you want to come up and help, that's awesome, because I don't know how to turn those off. But I'll just touch it periodically. Here you go. You're smarter than me. All right, I like it. But I put the picture of the anchor with the dart of what's really holding you back. When you look at position training, everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're just trying to help others achieve their best. And for us, again, just remembering, you've already experienced, you know exactly the foundation. You know what your position is supposed to do. We're good?
Let's see.
All right. Thank you. You know what you're supposed to do. Where am I at? Let's see. There we are. Let's see if I'll have to flip all the way through. There we are. So how do you, again, influence the business quicker, faster, cheaper? What is your personality traits that get you there? I always put myself and say, okay, I'm a huge fan of there's a couple behavioral sciences, Thaler, that talks about choice architecture and nudging. Like, we all do that. Like, I was driving here today, and I got this windshield wiper fluid is low. Well, that's a nudge, right, from the car manufacturer to say, hey, idiot, put some stuff in here or else you're in a snowstorm and you're not going to have enough in there. There's everything around us is built on nudging. And so when you look at your organization, what can you do as a strategic person inside of the finance department alone to nudge those around you to do what is necessary to achieve the same goal? All right, now we're going to keep going to some more stuff that's more fun, the strategy talk. So this is where I love. Like, this is where I think all of us love to be, and we try to get there, but we have to get past the other stuff to be able to get to the strategic part. This is where I think, for us, when we look at what is the engine of our company, we have to start peeling layers away. Who are we? Who are our customers? What are our go-to-market efforts? Who's our customer type? How are we going to address them? What does it cost us to get a customer? All of these things drive into the engine type of the company. And do you know what your engine is? Sometimes we kind of happenstance into them. I was serving or helping a company. They make beehives. Local company, they do about $3 million of revenue. Small little company. They couldn't help themselves, frankly, to get people that wanted to buy their products. Their challenge, they couldn't execute. Their engine was scattered. They're moving stuff all over the place. And I'm a bit of a lean manufacturing guy, but more so on like just a lean operations that's trying to fix processes so that there's less waste. For me, it was just converting them to a lean manufacturing model was a 30% increase in margin because they're not moving crap from here to there to try to get out the door. Your organizations, if you empowered certain individuals in those organizations, you're going to find that 30% gain. Without question, you will. Whether it's automation or it's encouragement or different comp plans, there's plenty of different ways to find out how to do the same thing slightly different. Now, one of the biggest lessons I learned coming out of being at Tanner or any other CPA firm was I had no clue how to model. No clue. Conceptually, we learn it in business school. You don't use that in CPA land, like in public accounting. To me, this was the biggest eye-opener when I left public accounting because the first thing somebody asked me was, great, can you build me a model for this? And I quickly phoned my friends and said, I can't say no. I'm smart enough to know how to do this, but I don't have like the recency knowledge to be able to build it. Now, I probably spend half of my day sitting into how do I tinker with something that I already believe in, that I already fixed yesterday, to look at it slightly different in order to potentially gain a slight edge or a slight speed that maybe I didn't see yesterday. And it's a hard process to go through because you're always questioning your own conclusions. But for me, it's trying to get from, again, that automated system to a reflective system to an automated system where I just know if this, then this. And then I am actually, unfortunately, the optimist of the company. You know Ron, he is not an optimist. But it's the yin and yang version of CEO, CFO, where I actually have the opportunity to just be authentic to who I am in every, which is a super optimist. I believe we'll challenge and tackle every little problem. The hard part is, does the model support the optimism or not? And do the scenario buildings lead you to saying, yeah, the likelihood of that scenario is higher than the others? Now we all talk about data, and Ron, bless his heart, he beats on me on data. Well, we're 3 years in. So when you start looking at data for a 3-year company, and you're hunting in, let's say, all contractor-based gig platforms, there is no database out there for gig platforms. There may not be a database or a data set for you as you go march into a new vertical. So what do you do? I don't have a great answer because I deal with this every single day. We're trying to go to the buyer that all of you guys know because you're them. Admittedly, like you're them. We call you all Finance Fred inside of every, which is a great persona type for us to think about. But we're always trying to figure out like what motivates somebody to change or look at the world differently and do something uncomfortable that ultimately we know is the future, because from a banking side and the payment side, we know that that's the future, but the world hasn't yet adopted or is willing to adopt something that is a little bit more aggressive yet. And so when you look at, I talk about these breadcrumbs is the data, right? Tea leaves is, okay, what do I think it's going to happen? And then for me, this is where I live a lot in. 100% instinctual, which is very uncomfortable for a CEO. Super uncomfortable. Well, why is it? Good question. I just feel like it's this way. Well, how do you get from feeling then to data? And we talk about availability heuristic. This is just, do you have access to data? Is it readily available? Is it consistent? Like these things you have to think about. And are you looking at it the right way? I'll tell you, there is times inside of our company where you look at the same data set, GTM sees it one way, the CEO sees it a different way, and I see it very different. The same data set. So the stories we tell, frankly, they're all based upon our past history. And so now it comes to, okay, great, in that scenario building, you can look at it this way, and I completely respect that, but how do I encourage and influence now the organization to see something many different ways and then to harmonize on what we want to do as a company? Ultimately, it's not our decision, right? Alone as a CFO to say, okay, this is the way we're going to go. It's an executive team or it's a CEO decision, but it's for us to influence and have them consider the various aspects the way we see the world. Oftentimes, we're the only ones that see the world the way we do. Very often. From a finance world, for us, like we're on an island. So I encourage you to consider, can you build scenarios off of how you see something so that visually the rest of the organization understands where you're coming from? Now we're living in this interesting world of, we talked above about capital acquisition and pricing models. I don't know if your businesses have these issues, but for us, we're venture backed. Bless our hearts. It's like this treadmill that, how many of you are in venture backed companies actually? Okay. So it's like this weird treadmill that you just hope to get off eventually, but you don't know if you can. But for me, it just makes everything go faster and faster and faster constantly. And so true to what Gary said above, again, was cash, burn rate, right? Those are the things we live with. Revenue growth to burn rate ratios, like these things matter for us. For other companies, potentially it's what is margin, net profitability. So what are those KPIs for you that you know that the CEO and the business owners want to look at that may not be the standard ones? And then how do you influence and look at scenario building to drive at those items that you know matter most to them? So instead of trying to run a parallel path that this matters to me and this matters to them, try to find scenarios that allow you to bridge the gap between the two and see the world the same. And I always love this quote, though we can't direct the wind, we can adjust the sails. Ron, he calls them levers. Like which levers of the business can we pull? We need more growth. We need to reduce spend. Like what are those levers? Typically there's 5 or 6 of them for a company. So when you're building a financial model, there's really very few. There's really few inputs that really matter. Everything else just kind of goes. So what are those 6 ones that you know that you can lean on? In the event you have to build those scenarios, it's 6 toggles, truthfully, and you can see the outcomes. Don't make these uber complex models that even you can't understand or you have to be the one explaining it. To me, that's just, it's a hard way to live a life because you're creating your job for you, but it's also creating distance between you and everyone else instead of shortening the gap. And this is one thing I always say is I hate, and I'll say it, CFOs that just scorekeep. It drives me crazy. Like, here's the KPIs. Here's where we're at. Okay, great. We're behind revenue again. Okay, what's new? That doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the KPIs and the scorecards and all those fun things that we think are really cute in the dashboards, ultimately, that's an image today, just like the budget. It doesn't help us influence the organization better. All that is saying, okay, great, we know where we're at, now what? So try to get from the KPIs to something that actually is influencing the organization instead of worrying about where we're at so deliberately. It looks like you fixed the computer, so well done, well done. All right, and the last little topic, and I don't know how much time we have before we'll take some questions, is this. And this, I think, is the hardest of all of our businesses. What is the true vision of the company? Well, we want to sell more. Okay, great. Everyone does. But truly, like, what at the core of what the company is, what are you trying to accomplish in the world? What is the mark you're trying to leave? What is that? And to me, if we understand that as a CFO and the vision of the CEO, it's easier for us to, again, bridge the gap between our professionals, whether it be the GTM team, sales and marketing, or operations, or whoever. We can all see the world through the same lens. And that's why this image is there, is really trying to get everyone to see the lens, the world the same way. That's not the lens for us to see. It is for everyone in the organization, and can we influence them to come along with us? Now, I think everyone knows Simon Sinek, right? So what's the why of the organization? Do we know that? What is your strategic plan? Like, these are all things that we do. The outcome is the day-to-day operations. How do you each and every day understand, how do you connect head to heart with your employees to allow them to also see why the company exists. Super weird thing that I'm sure a lot of tech companies do, but I didn't experience it before we start Every, but it's all hands meeting once a month. And it actually is pretty informative. More informative than I probably would generally give. Revenue marks, go-to-market strategies, operation issues, all those things are discussed in an hour-long discussion, which is super interesting for me to see transparency where in my previous jobs, we didn't have that. It was go do another audit, or let's go do another project, or let's do this. It was more of like, okay, why are we here? We did love at Tanner, like they have like the cool slogan of, what is it, to make an impact on everyone around you every single day or something like that. Right, Jonathan? Okay. And so I love the fact that their core purpose or core value is really just to make a difference in the person across the table. To me, it was tremendous, super valiant. And do we have that at the core for us? Do we know what that is for our company? For us at Every, it's atomizing. So it is purely speed. How do I make you feel valued? Well, the easiest way to make somebody feel valued is pay them quicker. Ping pong tables and all these things, like those are all things of the past in the remote environments. So there's very few things now, I believe, in the future that are going to allow remote workers to connect to their workforce. That's the part that scares the heck out of me, honestly, as a organization that's trying to scale from 25 to 50 to 500 people, is how do you connect your employees and your workforce to the vision of the company when they don't see anybody? I don't know how. Like I probably wrestle often with that very topic of, I don't know. Is it vision? Is it more all hands meetings? Well, I hate sitting on Zoom. I hate it. It's okay, well, that's the only connection you have. So how do you force it then to happen? Is it a delivery once a week with something from the company? Like, I don't know. But strategically as CFOs, the going back to work experience, it's never going to be the same. Every will never have an office space that is for 100% of our workforce. We're probably saying it's about 30% of our workforce. And how does that look for you? And how do you connect your workforce to the vision? How do you get them engaged? How do you get them driving at creating value for whoever your shareholders are, or frankly for their customers? Because customer value creates shareholder value. So I'd encourage you to figure out, like, how do you want to do it? What is the vision of the company in all those scenarios? And this is where I spend a lot of time. I'm probably a closet salesman at heart. So for me, when I look at these are the questions we have to be solving. You should spend a lot of time inside of all your department heads understanding why aren't they winning? What resources are they constrained with? How do they look at the world a little bit differently? What products can we offer to the market that are different? Like this is how we should be doing our job. It's not, again, KPI metrics and dashboarding. It's not that. This is what matters. Because you're the only person that's going to be able to see the connection. The only person. So when we start looking at this, I would ask yourself, and write some thoughts down on why aren't you winning? Go ask the department heads. And then try to figure out, are there breadcrumb trails, so to speak, in between all of those little data points that allow you to see the world a little bit differently? And then can we solve them? So we'll kind of go into here in the operations capacity piece here and say, again, for us, we generally as CFOs believe in a zero-sum game. GTM gets more money. Ultimately, it may or may not drive revenue. If I give another dev, they're always going to be late. So regardless if I get another headcount over there, it may not accelerate processes. We think of it as zero sum, like I win, you lose. We gotta force ourselves to not look at the world. It's exhausting, frankly, to look at the world as a zero-sum game. It's terrible, but it's important because if we feel that, then innately there's something that's causing that in our organization. Are they always late? Okay, great. Well, let's figure out why. Are they overworked? Are we asking too much? Do we really not know the dev process? I don't. It's like the black hole to me, and it's super uncomfortable. But I have to figure out, can we hit these sales numbers? Because that drives cash burn, fundraising, but I gotta get somehow some predictability around when this product feature is gonna launch. And a lot of it comes to, again, how can we influence this? And what are the things that matter? All right. Now, how much time do you spend with go-to-market people? Like, on average. When you say, okay, I can, of my 100 hours in a day or 100 hours that I work, how much time do you spend sitting with sales and marketing? Somebody throw out a number.
25%.
So a decent size. Others? 75, Curtis?
I'm in sales.
Oh. Generally, that's great. I'd say generally our CFOs that I know, they don't spend a lot of time here. It's what's the number that you can hit. And we're not asking a lot of questions like why. Why do you think it's that? Can we get more? Like, why are we in that channel? It's an inefficient channel. Obviously, we're hopefully doing our due diligence and looking at and slicing, dicing their data and saying, okay, yeah, you tell me that we're focused over here, but we're actually winning all of our customers from a different vertical than we're pointing at now. Do you know that? Like, why are we winning there? So a lot of this is us looking at, again, the same data, slightly different, to potentially get a different answer. It may be the same answer. If so, great. You're in Mecca. I don't know that it exists. But I would look at and consider, again, what can help the business the most. In software-led organizations, I spend 50 to 75% of my time in sales and marketing. Only because I'm the buyer, for the most part. So we're building a product that I generally know the emotional state of our buyer, and so how can I help solve the problems for our buyer? If I wasn't, I probably wouldn't spend as much, but I'd encourage you to spend at least that 25% time trying to understand what do they need and why do they need it. Often, all of us CFO, we live inside, it's on the last slide. We do this. Underfund growth. 3/4 of our CFOs, or CFOs, if you look at data sets, you always are underfunding growth. And your CEO is always telling you, spend more. Sales and marketing is always asking you, I need more. So I'd ask the question, can you, instead of underfunding, can you say, great, I'd love to give it to you. Guess what? Let's just go through a quick review of where you're winning. And then sure, as long as we can have certain performance metrics, why not? I would say throttle down. Again, I'm the super optimist though. But to me, it's let's not constrain the business if there's no reason to constrain it. If there's a cash issue or gross margin suffering, or you can't actually get to where you need to be, given the time frame you need to, yeah, sure, constrain. But if not, let's get ourselves out of our own way. Like, let's let the business run and have fun doing it. But to me, it's looking at, again, how in that data set can you help them look at things different? For me, velocity of product-led growth, so in SaaS world, this just means, hey, can somebody come in and use the product and us not have to train them on it? Can the product sell itself and allow us to not have CS overhead of 30% trying to get a customer engaged? Can I actually solve it in the product versus solving it with headcount? And these are interesting things in all of our businesses, whether you're not an audit firm or a professional service firm or a manufacturing firm, of can you actually build something differently, quicker? Can you have the customer do it? Half the time they want to do it. They have to use it anyways. But can you have half of your audits, so to speak, done by your client? How do you encourage them to do it? I don't know. I would never touch inventory. Like, I'm not a manufacturing guy. Like, to me, that's like the root of all evil. So sorry if I'm not talking about product stuff, but I don't love it. But again, for me then, looking at here, we should always have scenarios. 1, 2, 3 scenarios, short term, 1 year or less. 3 years. Scenario, 1, 2, 3, what if scenarios. You should know these very, very well, like the back of your hand. And the last thing, and Gary mentioned it, I think, and maybe Dave, unit economics are so, so important to all of us. Like, we have to know, what is this customer actually worth? If you know that, it is the easiest thing to go to the sales team and say, hey, great, guess what? Stop selling this because of this. Focus on this one, they're more profitable. Oh, they're easy to sell to anyways. Great. Glad we're on the same page. But a lot of this comes from just having the information there, and we're looking over, yes, the sales team's shoulder and looking at their data differently, but it's for the better of them because they look at it as a dollar in is a win regardless. We're the only ones, the cost center guys, that care if it's a profitable dollar or not a profitable dollar. And in SaaS world, you may not care if it's profitable because you don't know. You don't know what a customer life is. Like, we don't. We're in our first 3 years, and somebody asks us, what's the lifetime value of a customer? Great question. Are you an investor? Or like, what are you? Because I'll give you a different answer. But we don't know. And your business may not know. If it's a new vertical set, like a new vertical that you're hunting to, you may not know the data set. But you have to make assumptions, and that's why scenario building is super, super important. All right. Last piece here. This is where I'll kind of land and leave. You can tell that I'm like an organizational, like emotional kind of CFO guy. To me, that's just how I live my life is, okay, I have to figure out why and influence people around me, and how do I know why they're influencing me the way they are? So for me, obviously, you've got to know what are your strengths, and I don't call them weaknesses, I call them opportunities, in a little cute phrase, right? But for me, it's how do I improve those rough edges? Why am I a little bit different? Is that helpful or is it hurtful? And again, how do I, in my little sphere of engagement, which is generally 10 people or less, frankly, in a company, how do I, in those 10 people, help them know to drive to the same direction? How do I influence them to go and help me, frankly, first, understand my weaknesses, but then also to understand how do we march forward together? I would encourage you to look at what choices are you putting around your workforce and your team? What are you asking them to do? Is it the right thing? Are you giving them choices, or are you just creating the framework and they have to follow? Like, it's very interesting to look at, are you creating the people you work with? Yes, right? The answer is yes. The question is are you creating the best version of themselves? Like, do you really have that intent to say, okay, I care that much about that person that I'm going to create choice architecture, like a series of nudges around them that allow them to become better? If you aren't, shame on you. 100% shame on you, because you should be trying to develop professionals in every single aspect of your business. That is our job as human beings. It is not the job necessarily of just the CFO. We have to lead out first to encourage people to scale up, because we don't know. We don't know when the inflation rate's going to go up. We don't know when we're going to need more out of that person. We don't know if they're going to be the next leader of the organization. We don't know. But it's important for us to make the difference, as Tanner's slogan is, to make that positive impact every day. And then here, these last two, I always kind of leave with one of my good friends, and you guys know who he is, Tanner, Bakari Kamaro. He's like my best bud. He's this poor guy from Mali that his parents shipped him on a boat here when he was 17. And frankly, he didn't know a lick of English. And he ended up getting his Mac degree from UVU and was one of the guys I hired when I was at the firm. On his phone, when I see him, this is the thing that sits on his phone. And it means so much to me because for me to have a guy that frankly came to the world, to the US, not knowing anything, and his parents just said, hey, go make a life for yourself. Well, again, to me, it's like we should think about this in every moment. How do I, as a CFO, want to be remembered? But more so, how do I, as a person, want to be remembered? Do I want to be an influential person in the organization? How am I going to be it? And then how do I scale up people around me? By, again, just being slightly different, but encouraging them to be better each and every day. So I'll leave you with, how do you want to be remembered, my fellow CFOs? All right. Now I think we have a few minutes for questions. I don't know. I'll take some if you want. I know we're all notorious for not asking questions, and that's cool too. But if there are some, we can talk. Yes, sir.
You mentioned our propensity to kind of underfund growth.
Yep.
What are your recommendations for dealing with the constraints that we always look at? You know, we look at debt, income, and expenses, and how do you overcome some of those challenges when you're looking at giving a proper amount to that area?
Yeah, so the question I would generally ask myself is, are you winning, and are you winning big? If you're not winning or winning big, the answer is probably no, right? We can't overfund, or we're not constraining the GTM engine at that point. I look at it and say, okay, do we know what the vein of gold is? What industry are you in? Maybe I'll ask.
Healthcare.
Oh, geez.
Laboratory.
Oh, laboratory healthcare. Oh, well, I don't know then, honestly, because I don't know how your growth is. Like, I don't know your business enough.
Valuing the opportunity appropriately, it sounds like.
Yeah, so a lot of it is, how are you gauging, how are you acquiring customers, first and foremost? What do they care about? And then does your product actually fly off the shelves? You know, when you go in to raise a Series B round, it's like, you should have product market fit, and now you know what your GTM is. You put $1 in here, and it gives you whatever, $1.50 out, right? So these are the engine points for me that make me realize, okay, I know that I'm constraining growth if I just don't dump a whole bunch of more money inside of the GTM or the sales and marketing effort. The other side is it may be, hey, great, we can't yet fund growth because there is operation issues we have to fix because we're not ready for the growth. And I would consider that too, especially if you're in like a hard, heavy, asset-intensive business, is can you actually handle new protocols, for example, I guess, if they came back and you needed to do more? I don't know, but I would look at that first before you start funding growth that you can't absorb. Because the worst experience for any of us is, right, a customer that comes in, they want to buy you, but you love to sell them. They get in the door and now they're sitting dormant because they can't buy or it's a bad experience. That's just a bad way to put money into growth engine. So sorry, I don't have a better answer, but I would look at it as, can you actually fulfill it? And if so, perfect. We're deliberately inefficient on the CS side. We try to solve that with David George software, frankly, a CS product, and we try to automate the onboarding experience. But there's still too many manual processes for me to throttle down on the growth side because I know we'd just get hammered and the customer experience wouldn't be that good. All right. with that, thank you. Unless there's more questions, great to meet you all, and good to see friends again.